Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Bosch. I am the chair of the Pearson Centre, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our evening with the Honourable David Peterson. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis people. If you haven't started your salad already, please go ahead and start eating while I'm speaking. As you may know, the Pearson Centre was founded 12 years ago as a progressive think tank. We bring people and ideas together in search of good public policy. We are the only think tank that regularly brings together elected representatives from all parties with business, labor, NGOs, and other concerned Canadians. We like to say we are multi-partisan. So thank you everyone for joining us here this evening. We're very lucky to have Mr. Peterson and our interlocutor for the night, the incredible journalist, Steve Paikin. Before I begin, at the Pearson Centre, we like to lean in hard to the legacy of Lester Pearson, and I've decided that we are going to create what I call the Order of the Pearson Centre. I had planned this award. I'd written a way to get some nice enamel pins that'd be just like the Order of Canada. That was about 3 weeks ago. Well, unfortunately, my pins have not arrived in the mail yet for some reason. But I decided I still wanted to go ahead and award our first recipient for the person who has done a lot to support the Pearson Centre. And this person, I didn't want to wait. This person has great connections to everybody in this room and has worked in Toronto and worked around Queen's Park for a long time. So I decided to go in a different direction. Lego. Okay. You may know in Ottawa we have something called Poly-Lego. It's considered a high honor to be honored on Poly-Lego. I think it goes Order of Canada, well maybe Nobel Peace Prize, then Order of Canada, then Poly-Lego, then the Order of Ontario. So the person I'd like to honor is actually, with our inaugural Pearson Centre, Order of the Pearson Centre Award, is also the lead organizer of this event. So Pam Gutteridge, could you please come up and get your Lego? Okay. So we'll do a proper ceremony eventually, but this is Lego Pam. Lego Pam will be featured on social media, X and Instagram, now on TikTok. So there's Lego Pam for you.
Thank you.
And I know what you're thinking. Would you actually have a Lego Pam and do that in front of David Peterson and Steve Paikin and not have a Lego David Peterson and a Lego Steve Paikin? So I absolutely do. So when you gentlemen come up, you'll get these serious awards as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Okay, great. Yeah. Before I begin, there are a couple people we wish were with us here tonight. So I wonder if we could raise a glass in honor of Jim Bradley, Ken Dryden, and Jim Peterson. There we go. Great. Thank you. We are absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to salute the Honourable David Peterson, Ontario's 20th Premier, for his many contributions to Ontario and indeed to Canada. Joined by the author and journalist and longtime host of TVO's The Agenda, Steve Paikin, we will look back at a pivotal time in Ontario's history. September marked the 50th anniversary of David Peterson's first election as an MPP in London Centre, and a decade later he was leading one of the most consequential Ontario governments of the modern era. We'll explore all of that and the reflections on modern politics in our discussion this evening. First, I'd like to recognize my board colleagues. Dr. Karen Mock is here, past chair of the Pearson Centre. Current Executive Vice Chair Indira Naidu-Harris is here. And Kathy Kotras. Our MCs for tonight include Indira and Pat Delzell. Pat is Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Market Development at Bruce Power. Pat's roles focus on the development and growth of the corporate identity through government and stakeholder relations, corporate and community communications, and promoting energy, innovation, and the use of nuclear isotopes in the fight against cancer. Pat also sits on the board of the Canadian Nuclear Association and is chair of the Association of Power Producers of Ontario. And the wonderful Indira Naidu-Harris is the Associate Vice President, Diversity and Human Rights at the University of Guelph. Indira is a champion of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and an authority on women's issues, education, childcare, immigration, and media. She's a... I'm far from done. She's a former Minister of Education in Ontario, former MPP at Queen's Park. Before that, Indira was a journalist and a broadcaster, and she currently serves as Executive Vice Chair of the Pearson Center's Board of Directors. Please come up, Pat and Indira.
Well, thanks a lot, Kevin. It's a real honor to be here this evening, and we're delighted to be here, part of the Pearson Center's tribute to the Honorable David Peterson, as we look back on his government's achievements. And normally at this point in anything I do, public speaking, I refer to AI and I make some really bad dad jokes, or I make a reference to nuclear having Riz or something that would make my daughter cringe. But as co-chair tonight, I'm going to keep us on a tight timeline and skip all that for you. You're welcome. So we look forward to the discussion with the Honorable David Peterson and Steve Paikin, as previously mentioned. Indira?
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Kevin, for the lovely introduction. Good evening, everyone. Bonjour, bonjour, Ani. What a fantastic room. Honestly, I'm looking around this room and I see friends, colleagues, family, and not one, but two premiers sitting at a table. How lucky are we, folks? So, I'm absolutely pleased to be here with you all tonight for a very special evening. Tonight, as mentioned, we're honoring an extraordinary man, the Honorable David Peterson, a trailblazing premier who ushered in bold policies and reforms, as we heard. But what's important about his bold policies and reforms is that they were thoughtful. Thoughtful policies focused on people and the challenges that they are facing, like gender equity, rights, and affordability. So important right now. Policies that change lives and laid the foundation for a solid path to the future for all Ontarians. A future that some may say is at risk right now. I bring that up because I think that as we listen to our amazing conversation today, I think it's important that we think very carefully about what's been done in the past by the premiers in this room, and also the road ahead to the future. But on that note, I want to take a moment to acknowledge some very amazing folks who are here with us tonight. So I'm going to ask you all, if you don't mind, to just hang on to your applause for a little bit, because I'm going to take a moment to recognize our sponsors, many of whom who are here with us tonight. An impressive list, so hang on. Our sustaining sponsors are, in alphabetical order, AMAPCO, Ontario's Professional Employees Union, Canada's Buildings Trades Union, the Cannabis Council, Faskins, Nuclear Waste Management Ontario, and TikTok. Our platinum sponsors are Bruce Power and Sandstone Group. Our gold sponsors are the International Association of Firefighters and North Star Spark Advocacy Newswatch. The silver sponsors are OECTA, Ontario's English Catholic Teachers Association, and the University of Toronto. A big thank you also to all of you for your generous support of the Pearson Centre. What I mean is that those of you who bought tables and bought tickets, in addition to our sponsors, so important right now, and we're so grateful, because your generosity makes it possible for us to discuss what good policy is all about and to celebrate good policy on an evening like this. And so, for all of you, I'm going to ask you all to give yourselves a warm round of applause, and especially to our amazing sponsors. Thank you.
And so well, you guys were really good at holding your applause. I'm impressed. Usually it doesn't work so well. So I'm going to ask the same of all of you as we take a moment to introduce our principal table and the other special guests we have with us here this evening. If you were applauding, we'd literally be here all night. So I appreciate holding off on that. So from our principal table, former Premier and tonight's guest of honor, David Peterson and Shelley Peterson. Former Premier Kathleen Wynne and Jane Routhwaite. Our moderator this evening, Steve Paikin. You, of course, have met Kevin Bosch, who was up here before. The Pearson Center CEO, Pam DeMoff, and Francesca Grosso. Also with us this evening, members of Parliament Yvonne Baker from Etobicoke Center, Ali Asasi from Willowdale, Chi Nguyen from Spadina Harbourfront, and members of Provincial Parliament, Rob Serjanik from Ajax, Lee Fairclaw from Etobicoke Center, Mary Margaret McMahon from Beaches East York, and Adil Samji from Don Valley East. Also with us this evening, retired Senator Jerry Grafstein, former federal minister, the Honorable Tony Clement, former MPPs, Catherine McGarry, Eleanor McMahon, and Deb Matthews. From David Peterson's cabinet and caucus, Charles Beer, Alvin Curling, David Fleet, and Bob Wong. And also former regional councillor, deputy mayor, and former president of the Ontario Liberal Party, Jack Heath. I also want to mention that tonight we have 9 out of the 10 OLIP members from Queen's Park joining us here. Let's give them all a warm welcome. And I do have a special note here from somebody who's unable to join us, but sent his best wishes. I'll just read it now. Dear David, I'm sorry I could not join you on this special occasion. I take consolation in knowing that you'll be surrounded by friends and admirers. It would have been the perfect evening, but for the guy who was going to interview you. Sorry, I did not write this, right? Can't blame me, Steve. As an Ontarian, I remain grateful for the many reforms you ushered into our province. You lifted our sights and raised our ambition. We'd had enough of slow and steady, and were eager to reach higher and move faster. You invited us to make the future ours, and it was your vision and leadership that beckoned us, all of us, forward. You told us Ontario had been commissioned to lead, and under your leadership, we led in so many ways. I became a Liberal Riding Association president in 1986. My father ran for you in 1987, as I did in 1990. My brother is active in politics today, also having been influenced by the Peterson years. Based on you, Ontario Liberals today feel deeply our responsibility to represent a bright future to the present, to keep reaching higher, and to keep doing ambitious things for the people of our great province. With great appreciation, Dalton McGitty.
Well, thanks everyone. We will be back shortly with our fireside chat, but for now, please enjoy a delicious dinner. And a reminder that if you would like to enter the draw for our copy, 2 copies we have actually, whoops, sorry, Steve. 2 copies of Steve Paikin's book, Paikin and the Premiers. Very, very appropriate, I think, for today's evening. Please remember to make sure you've got a business card handy. Some folks are going to go around with some baskets. Put your business cards in, and you will get a personal signed copy if your name is drawn later on. You won't want to miss that. Take care.
So as Kevin mentioned earlier, September 18th marked the 50th anniversary of David Peterson's first election as MPP, London Centre. A decade later, he was leading one of the most consequential Ontario governments of the modern era, ending 42 years of Ontario progressive conservative dominance. His government ushered in bold reforms, freedom of information laws, environmental protection, rent controls, and fully funded Catholic schools, transformed Ontario's political landscape into a competitive multi-party arena. It was a time of transformational change, and tonight we'll revisit that time from David's perspective.
And here to lead us in tonight's conversation is the highly respected journalist, Steve Paikin. Now, Steve is no stranger to any of us. That's because he's been on our television screens and so in our living rooms, really, for decades. You see, Steve has been producing fact-based public interest pieces for nearly 4 decades. And for 19 of those, he has been the face and the driving force behind the highly respected TV Ontario flagship current affairs show, The Agenda. So for close to 2 decades, Steve interviewed everyone from his first guest, Conrad Black, to Mikhail Gorbachev, and his final guest on the show, his dad, Larry Paikin. I watched it, Steve. It was great. The Agenda has been an amazing program, but sadly, it recently ended its run, and so now you can catch Steve Paikin on TVO Today, live, or the Paikin or On Poly podcast. And in case that wasn't enough, he is also a highly respected author and a documentary producer with a list of honors and recognitions that are too long to mention. But, I'm getting to it, but what you may not know is that Steve and I worked together at TVO for a couple of years, and that's when I found out he actually has another secret skill that most people don't know about that could be added to the list. Yes, believe it or not, Steve Paikin is also a relentless jokester. Do you know where I'm going with this, Steve? Okay, so let me just put it in perspective. In those years, the premier at Queen's Park was Mike Harris, and my name was Indira Naidu Harris. And let me tell you, for years, whenever I bumped into Steve in the elevator, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, I would be teased relentlessly. Hey, Indira, how's Mike? How's the husband doing? It would go on and on and on. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I'm just telling you that even though he's got all these other things to his name, you probably didn't think that we could be adding jokester to it. And so it gives me now great pleasure to introduce you to you all tonight, the award-winning journalist and my good friend, Mr. Steve Paikin, who will lead us through our fireside chat with the amazing Honorable David Peterson. I'd like to ask you both now to come up to the stage.
Hello, Preem.
Paikin, I don't think you're that funny, but can I tell you? Let me tell you a story. I'll tell you a true story. When I was chancellor at University of Toronto, we awarded. You can see they have low standards down there. We awarded Steve Paikin an honorary degree. And I recalled how when Paikin he first came to Queen's Park working for CBC, and I referred to him as a snot-nosed little journalist. I had no idea he was going to turn into Walter Cronkite. And so that's what I'm dealing with, Walter Cronkite. Whatever he says is the truth, just so you know.
Gee, thanks, Preem. Okay. Well, okay, here's the challenge we have tonight, you and I, because we started recently a new program at TVO over 6 Friday nights called the Premier Files, and you were the first one 2 Fridays ago. Bob Ray was last Friday.
It's all been downhill. Is that your point? Is that your point?
You do know Kathleen's sitting right there,
Oh,
right?
Jesus. I made it. Then it's going back uphill.
Mike Harris is this Friday night. How many people are going to watch the Mike Harris interview in this room, I wonder? Okay.
If you're tied up, it's okay.
So we did an interview. We did quite a lengthy interview for that show. And then we also did, on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of your election victory, earlier this year, we did an interview at that event as well. So the challenge is to find something that we have not yet talked about, because I suspect there are some people in this room who've either been at that event or seen the Premier Files on TVO, saw your interview.
So you want to talk about the defeat? What do you want to talk about?
No, I actually
Okay.
want to talk about, I want to start with, I know there was a great build-up there earlier about, you know, we're going to revisit 1985 and talk about all the great policy and this, that, and the other thing. But everybody in this room knows about that stuff already. I want to ask you some stuff that I don't think I've ever asked you before, which we're going to start with family. Your dad was one of the original signatories to the Regina Manifesto, and he ran for Queen's Park against John Robarts in London in 1955.
Right.
And I wonder if all three of his boys decided to get into politics because of the example he set.
I'm sure that had lots to do with it, Steve. Just back up a bit. My dad his parents were Norwegian immigrants, hardly spoke English. They came to Chicago. They were given a land grant in North Dakota. This was at the turn of the century. They got 100 acres. The first child, there were 13 kids, 13 little Norwegians running around the place. The first kid was born on the sod by my grandmother alone in front of that house. Now, that's not that long ago. And so when you kind of take this into as part of your heritage, my dad was the first one born in the hospital. He was the sixth kid. By that time, they'd moved to Saskatchewan because they'd lost all these farms. And it was a very tough world they lived in. And during the Depression on the prairies was as tough as it got. There was a drought, and it wasn't only tough, nobody thought it was going to get any better. There were no governments to help you. There was no, you were on your own, more or less. Now, they had lots of love in the family, very little education, very little support of any type. Fortunately, my dad was extremely smart. He was a brilliant man, and he was very successful in life eventually. But he left home at 13, and he lived in Regina, and the only support he had was he joined the YMCA, and he learned how to speak. And he will tell you that he didn't know table manners. He couldn't go to out for a respectable place for dinner. He had no friends. He had to figure all of life out himself. And he eventually became part of the CCF. He was a young activist. He just felt it was wrong that the world didn't offer support and help for people at that point.
If he was CCF, why aren't you?
Well, I'm smarter than my dad, the answer is. Stephen, that's a legitimate question. You know, I am very much, even though I am in my politics fiscally very prudent, you can see that we balance budgets. I think the wellspring of government has to be kindness and decency and helping people that don't have a voice of their own. I don't worry about the rich guys. They're really good at taking care of themselves. I don't look at the really big, powerful groups. They can look after themselves, and life's a fight with it. Our job was and is to speak for the people that don't have a voice. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of it. Well, that was the tradition, Stephen, that he brought. And when he came to Ontario after the war with $50 and my mom, He started his own business in London, Ontario, but he never forgot that thing that the more you have, the more you owe. And that was very much part of our lives. That was part of, and it's never about you, it's about what you can do for other people. No, he was a practical, successful man, but that just allowed him to do more. So he was maybe the only Liberal in London in 1955. He ran against John Robarts. He lost. He ran again federally in '63. He was a local councillor. I'll just tell you one thing. I remember my mom and dad were knocking on doors, and they would, they'd meet somebody that didn't have what we had. They'd steal our kids, my two brothers and my clothes, and give them to these people at the door. I didn't see the equity of that at the time, but that's the kind of people they were, all of their lives, to their children and to their grandchildren.
Let me bring you to the middle 70s then. There are 3 brothers. You're the middle one. You ran first, though, right? Of the 3 brothers?
Geez, I think Jimmy ran. Did I? Shelley? Geez, I'm glad Shelley's here. Can I tell you? Do you want some advice? Always marry a younger woman. It'll help you remember stuff. I guess I did.
Did you 3 boys have a discussion about who was going to run?
No.
No?
My whole life was serendipity. It was accidents. Things happened to me. And things happened to Jimmy. And Jimmy and Timmy, my younger brother who ran too. And it was just kind of accidents all along the way. But we all came from that upbringing, and for which we are enormously grateful.
So Jim's nose was not out of joint when you ran first and won.
My brother Jimmy is so successful at everything. His wife, his widow here, is here, Heather.
There she is, okay.
I'll tell you, you want some other gossip? He met Heather in grade 9. I don't think he'd ever been out with another girl. At least I know he'd never kissed another girl. I know that for a fact. And they had the happiest marriage, and Jimmy had a very successful career. And Jimmy was the best at everything. The best at school, the best valedictorian, the best in the hockey team. There's just nothing my brother couldn't do. And he also happened to be one of the kindest people on earth. So he was very good to me and to his other younger brothers.
Well, you say there's nothing he couldn't do, but in fact, when he ran for the first time in '79, he lost. Was that a sticking point between the two of you? I'm looking for trouble here. You can see that, right?
One of the things, Stephen, one of the lessons we were taught is success and failure in life are both fickle mistresses. And you don't judge your life on that basis. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. You're judged. Other things are more important to judge people on. And Jimmy always took that view. Jimmy won, Jimmy lost. He was back, he was in the cabinet, out of the cabinet. Very successful federal minister of the Crown. Well liked by everybody. One of the most loved members of Parliament. I think my friends in the House would agree with me. And he made a tremendous contribution to this country.
I'm actually not trying to be difficult about this, but I think it's in my head because I did ask Ken Dryden about this, because he was the younger brother and yet had a significantly better career in the National Hockey League than his older brother Dave. And I always wondered if that created any friction between the two of them. And he said no, because Dave never let it get awkward. And I wonder if you had that same kind of thing ever with your older brother.
Never, ever, ever, ever once. He was so totally supportive. We were supportive of each other. We knocked on the doors, we helped each other, talked a lot. No, because part of that, he was the older brother, and he was the leader. But because he was such a generous and decent soul, it could have perhaps with somebody else, but never with Jimmy.
Okay. Jim Coots is in the news a lot these days, strangely enough, because his diaries have just been published, and we're learning a lot about that time that we didn't know before. You must have known him.
We actually knew Coots quite well. Coots was a good friend of Jim and Heather, personal friends beyond politics. But we actually, I first got elected in 1975, Jim Coots, and a lot of you'll know him, lived on Lowther Avenue, had this little dinky house about this wide. And then he moved 2 doors down, and we took over the lease. He gave us the house. Shelley and I took over that house when I was a member of Parliament. So I remember, I'm not kidding you, the house was this wide. And we had a crib in the corner. We had 1 bedroom, a crib in the corner, and 1 kid slept, and Chloe, who's right there, slept in a drawer. And that's how we lived in Toronto beside Coots. And we knew him quite well. And of course, he loved Shelley. Everybody loved Shelley, but he loved Shelley, and he was a very, very interesting and bright guy.
Okay. Since everybody in this room is expecting a little bit of 1985 reminiscence, let's try this. Bill Davis made the announcement that he was going to extend full public funding to the end of high school for the separate school system. I know OECTA is here today, so I thought I'd bring this up.
Oh.
But you actually did it. And then he made the announcement to build the Sky Dome, but then your government actually did it. And I wonder if you ever get kind of pissed off about the fact that Bill Davis gets either credit for stuff that you actually did.
But don't forget, the Archbishop accused him of being a Nazi, accused Davis of...
This is how Hitler changed education policy in Germany.
This is how Lou Garnsworthy accused Davis. Look, that was one of the most complicated pieces of legislation ever. But you're right. Bill Davis announced it and left. It was out of guilt, because don't forget, he'd run against the Catholics in 1971 on not 1 dime more. The policy had gone into abeyance. Nobody was talking about it much. But I think it was pure guilt. Either the Cardinal got to him, the Archbishop got to him, or somebody upstairs got to him. But anyway, he decided he's got to do this. And the Liberal Party, which had always been the party of, more or less, it was the Catholic, historically, the Catholic religion represented by the Liberals. So I walked into the House. I had about 20 minutes notice that one of the biggest policy shifts in the history of Canada, and said, we're going to shift all this. And I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about that policy. I knew where we were, so I had to stand up and respond on behalf of the Liberal Party, which we did. Then he left the Conservative Party in tatters over this. We were highly principled about it. Don't forget, there were lots of people who didn't like us for doing it, but we were there and consistent and clear, and Frank Miller was kind of wavering on the thing. So and then we brought in a bill, and it was, Stephen, let me say, and I asked Sean Conway, I said, Sean, when we become the government, you will be the first Minister of Education. This will be the first bill we're going to put in. He went at that with his great brain as a scholar, understanding the law. Don't forget, this was complicated legally, going back to Confederation. Don't forget, it went to the very fabric of our country and the history of our country, and some of the greatest political wars in this province. There's been a lot of political wars over Catholic and separate school education and French education. Sean handled that with an aplomb and a knowledge and a grace and consultation that is a model in how to do legislation in a complicated minority house, in a minority house, I remind you. So, look, I have great memories of this stuff, and I'm very proud, Stephen, of the execution. One of the things I'm most proud of, and I say this, I'm not challenged on it. We had the best cabinet ever assembled in the history of this province. And I say that. Conway was part of it. Bob Nixon, he's 98 years old. Jimmy Bradley, who just You and I were at his funeral on Saturday, the greatest environmental minister ever. Don't forget, the province of Ontario, we invented here in the province of Ontario, Jimmy Bradley was the minister, the blue box, which is all around the world today, all around the world. He stopped acid rain, shut down Sudbury, the biggest emitter of sulfuric acid in the world. And all these were tough things at the time. And Ian Scott, who was a most brilliant attorney general, don't forget, we ended, first government, I think, in Canada, and one of the first ones to end discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation under the Human Rights Code. Now, easy today, but really hard then. And when you had this enormously talented group of people that I was lucky to serve with, I say, we were blessed.
Let me follow up with one of those questions from sort of 35,000 feet, which is, a premier gets elected to exercise his or her best judgment, make decisions, and then at some point it ends, and somebody else comes in and does the same thing. How upset does a first minister get when a successor changes things that he or she may have wanted to stay the way it was?
Oh, you can't take that view, Stephen. You cannot. You have to be respectful of the system. Things change, understandably. Nobody's got a divine right to go on forever. You make your case as best as you can. Some people argue it's a short space to change the state, a short time to change the world, but ultimately we're accountable, and if we can't make the case properly, we lose. And so we won and we lost. It's all fair, and it's not good mental health to have any regrets. Regrets are the most useless of all human emotions. And I would say you carry on and you continue the fight if you still think you should, but don't take it personally. There's too much taking stuff personally in politics today, and we got to be above that.
Is there one policy in particular that one of your successors may have changed that has upset you the most?
Geez, I've never been asked that before. And I haven't. Can I get back to you on that, Steve? I'm not particularly upset about anything. But no, I don't. I bear none of them any malice, not one bit.
Okay, conversely, does she get a gold star for actually doing what you promised in 1985, namely beer and wine in the corner stores?
It's about time. What the hell are you so long for? Well, it's good to have a good drinking woman running the province, I'm just kidding, Kathleen. I'm just kidding. Kathleen did a wonderful job in doing it. Yeah, you know what? That was an interesting thing. We did promise that. And it was very catchy because it was in the middle of a beer strike. And everybody thought, oh man, like Peterson would be able to get beer the next day. It was a little more complicated than that. We actually took it to the House and were defeated. And eventually, Kathleen got around to doing the right thing, and I take off my hat to her.
Eventually she got around to doing the right thing. Okay. Interesting. You are, I have to say, maybe the leading expert alive today on the question of national unity in this country, because you have been through it. And I just wonder if, based on, as you've looked at this issue over the last many decades of your life, how are we doing today on that score?
Just fair. Just fair.
Because?
I do believe, Stephen, it is the single most important job of the Prime Minister to keep this country united. I think Mark is doing as well as it can possibly be done now, but don't forget, the polls in Quebec are all running as if it looks like the separatist forces will increase their position federally and provincially. You have an extremely difficult premier in Alberta that just takes it right up to the edge all of the time. I believe passionately. Don't forget, I didn't bring in, Meech Lake was the federal agenda, the national, just like trade was. And these are the big issues we had to handle. But it was my view, running this unique federation and running Ontario. Ontario's a unique, Canada's a unique federation in this sense. It's the only country in the world that's as decentralized as it is outside of Switzerland, where one province has so much power. Number two, it's the only place where we've got 35 to 40% of all the action. And some would argue we were the historical beneficiaries of the national policy and others, but with its huge industrial base, when I was there, if Ontario had been a separate country, it would have been the 11th largest country in the world in terms of GDP. This is not peanuts. I've said this is not, and we're in pari passu with Prince Edward Island, which is about the size of Sarnia. But you can see the way this country was stitched together, and history matters a lot, and you have to respect history. So we had to, in my opinion, the axis between Toronto, Quebec City, and Ottawa was fundamental to the good functioning of this country. And that's why we were so close to Quebec. Bourassa was a great friend of mine. That's why we stuck our necks out on the Meech Lake Accord. That's why we did everything we could to knit this together. And I say to you, 1995, we almost lost this country within a jot of that. That was a straight function and a result of the defeat of the Meech Lake Accord. Everything in practical terms that the Meech Lake Accord encompassed is a fact of life today. It's not constitutionalized. It was a modest adjustment, just like Confederation 1867 was a total compromise. Don't forget, this country grew out of compromise. We're not like the Americans who were born out of two great wars. They're still at war, and you can still see the legacy of their history and you see the legacy of our history. And I say, Canada's legacy is worth fighting for. That's not... It's not very heroic for a political leader to walk out and say, follow me, and I will compromise. It's kind of wishy-washy, as they say in the business. But that's what we do, and we accommodate. And we've become the most advanced multicultural nation on the world. Everybody respects diversity. People that don't get shut out pretty fast. We don't have political parties that encompass that. We've got to make sure we don't. And there is harmony in the compromised middle of decency and caring for each other. So yeah, Steve, you asked me about the things that you asked me about if I regret any of my successors, and I don't, because I know them all, and I actually respect them all. The greatest sadness to me in my life was the death of Meech Lake Accord, because I knew what would happen. And I've said before, it was like when that thing was killed, it was like watching one of my kids walking across the street in front of a car, and you know they're going to get hit by a car. And you know they're going to die, and possibly die, if you don't do something to protect it. And if it's in your power to do it, you have to do it. And here we are. 95, we almost lost the country. Been up and down. We've gone through the Clarity Act and all this kind of stuff. I get it. But it is still a scar in the country, particularly in Quebec. And we have to be very, very, very sensitive. I just say at the end of this, we're a hell of a lot better off together than we are apart. and we are being fragmented at the moment that needs strong, stable, and kind voices to speak about.
What do you think it says about you that 35 years after Meech's failure, you are still really able to get yourself into quite a lather about the fact that this thing didn't go through? I mean, we can all see it in you here. You are still pretty burned up about this.
I care an awful lot about this, Stephen. There's some things I care about, some things I don't. I care about this. And I think a lot of people in this room care about this stuff too, and are asking themselves, well, where are we? What do we do now? Look at this craziness that's happening in the United States. Are we on the right response? We're dealing with a lot of things in a lot of different ways than we used to in my day. So, there's lots of things to think about, and there's lots of things to worry about, and there's things to change, and we're all part of that. So, look, there are big things in life and there are little things in life, and that to me was a big thing.
I really should ask you a question, particularly given who's in this room, about the state of the Ontario Liberal Party today, which is in the midst of yet another leadership change because for the third consecutive election, the party came third, which has never happened before in history. What state do you think the party's in today?
I assume everybody in this room is a liberal. If you're not, please stand up. See? I told you. Nobody wants to risk being deaf in this room, right? Stephen, I've seen these things go up and down. Frankly, when I inherited the party in 1982, we were not in good shape. We didn't have any money. We were more or less a rural rump. Stuart Smith had done a good job dragging the party into the cities, but it was an uncompleted task. We only had one seat then. We were the urban face in London, Ontario, which used to be the most conservative city in Canada. So I've seen bad times, but I've also know what we did, and I talked about that fabulous group of people that I was privileged to work with, and there's a number in this room here. I mean, we sat together and put together the best research department in opposition this province had ever seen outside of Stephen Lewis's, and like Phil DeWong was running. I mean, Phil was here doing this stuff, and we took on the big trust company issues. We established credibility, we raised money, we got people engaged in policy, we recruited people, and we worked like donkeys for 3 years, and we were lucky, and the election was called, and all sorts of things broke our way, and we were able to exploit the opportunities and form the government after the Accord. So there's lots of luck, but you've got to make your own luck too, and you have to be ready to accept luck. Now, I think there's a fabulous situation right now, to answer your question. I think I've met 4 people here tonight, and some of them I don't know, if you want to stand up, you can, who are thinking about running for leader. Man, these are really smart and attractive and bright young people. And I just say, bring them all on. Show off what we have. There's an awful lot there. And things will break. Things will break. I mean, you got to give Doug credit for exploiting Trump. I think he's wasted a whole bunch of Crown Royal doing it, but that to me, because I'm against government waste. Anyway, I guarantee you the opportunity will present itself, and I guarantee you, with the right leadership, we can put ourselves in the position. Most people are not particularly, we eschew the extremes. I mean, Doug Ford has sort of moved into her, so he's not burdened by ideology. So, you know, and if he has to, he's not burdened by consistency. So he can change his mind if he needs to. No, he's been shrewd about a bunch of things. I get all that. But I tell you, we're in the right place intellectually, philosophically, from a values point of view. So I think it is a fabulous opportunity. And I tell you, if I was a young guy today, I'd run.
Well, I think Gladstone was actually 2 years older than you are now when he became Prime Minister of Great Britain. So it's not too late for you, you know.
Well, I'm a little older than Donald Trump.
Just a little.
But just a little younger than Joe Biden, so there you go.
Actually, let's finish up on that. Why not? That's a good place to stop. I can scarcely believe it because I was there, along with so many people in this room, in 1985, when a 42-year-old man was sworn in as the 20th Premier of Ontario, and you're about to turn 82, which I find shocking. Now, what's still on the to-do list for David Peterson approaching age 82?
I'm very blessed, Stephen. I have been very, very, very blessed in life. I have the best wife on earth and best wife on partner on earth. And so I'd like to stay around and look after her in her old age. But she's a hell of a lot younger than I am. That's the problem. And I have 3 wonderful children. One is here today, Chloe, and 7 grandchildren, and my oldest grandchild is right, that fuzzy-haired kid. Yeah? Great kid. And I am extremely blessed. And the thing that I'll tell you in personal terms, the thing I am most proud of in my life is my kids and their partners, their spouses, are all fabulous parents. And there's something about that it means a lot to me, because we have to be fabulous parents, all of us, to the next generation. We have to be fabulous stewards. We have to put more in than we take out. With the environment, we have no right to make a mess and expect the next generation to clean it up. Spending, to be perfectly frank, we don't have the right to spend money and expect our kids to pay for our consumption today. There's a lot of things out of whack in this province and in this country, in my view. We've taken the easy way out. And I don't think you can take the easy way out of the big problems, because you're always going to end up paying a price for that. So I think we have to stand for moral responsibility. We have to stand for generational responsibility and do things to make it better for the kids. There's lots of pressures on the world that they live in. So, you know, in my own little way, Stephen, I've been very blessed with, in my post-life, as I said, I was Chancellor of U of T. I loved it. It was the second gig I had in my life, working with all these young people. I attended 181 convocations in 6 years. I shook more hands doing that than I did in politics. and I love the energy and the optimism of these people. I'm blessed because I'm involved in a number of charities. I'm still involved with the university and a variety of other things that bring meaning and joy to our lives. So, and can I just say, since your last question, thank you for being here, because this whole thing of the truth is, what happened was Sean Conway was sitting up in Pembroke, or in Barry's Bay where he lives, and said, you know what, the problem with the Peterson regime is that people only remember the loss. And it was a spectacular loss. Nobody else could have done that. Only I could have done that. But then and it kind of clouded out the other things we did. And so he got together, Charles Beer, who's been the brains of this whole operation, who's right over here in the cabinet. They said, let's put something together and we'll see, they're writing a book. They've gathered a bunch of the ministers, academics and others, analyzing the things we did, the things we didn't do, and we've done a series of speeches. And I guess they wanted, it was a legacy. A great deal was accomplished. Stephen said that, Kevin said that, and substantive things. We changed the world a lot. But it was born out of, the fuel was idealism. Honest to God, I'm not sure I'm not sure we're that smart, but we were very idealistic, and there was a whole bunch of us. I mean, I don't mean one or two, I mean dozens, hundreds, that honestly believed they could change the world. And idealism is more powerful fuel than money. And we were able to gather that up at the time. And all of these people that I worked with, they've gone on to spectacular careers, they're great, continuing to contribute to making it a better place. And so it was a joy to be part of that, and enormously grateful to you for having us here and for listening to us, and so many old friends in the room, and a bunch of new friends, people that are engaged in the political processes from a variety of different points of view. And I would encourage you to keep doing it, because it's all we've got.
That's the 20th Premier of Ontario, David Robert Peterson. Thank you, Premier. Great to be with you tonight.
Thank you, Stephen.
There we go. There we go. Thank you. Thanks.
The Honorable David Peterson, everyone, and Steve Paikin. What an amazing interview. And I didn't think Crown Royal would somehow enter that conversation. I don't know about the rest of you, but I got to be honest, that was a bit of a surprise. And now I'm going to ask, actually, the CEO of AMAPCO, Ontario's Professional Employees Union, Dave Bulmer, to come on up and say a thank you to our folks.
So it's my pleasure to represent more than 17,000 professional public servants for whom progressive public policy discourse matters a great deal. It was a genuine pleasure to hear from not only Premier Peterson, but also Steve Paikin, a fellow public servant we've grown to trust over many years of journalism, whether on television, by podcast, and on many an election night. Thank you very much, Steve. My first opportunity to vote was, in fact, for David Peterson, or perhaps more accurately, another great politician, Sean Conway, good Ottawa Valley boy. As a union leader, Mr. Peterson, it isn't lost on me that a great deal of what we take for granted in present-day labor relations actually came as a result of your government. Those being positive changes, such as first contract legislation, workers' compensation expansion, pension reforms, pay equity, freedom of information, protection of privacy, and greater human rights. And for that, the workers of today say thank you. AMAPCO's partnership with the Pearson Centre provides us with opportunities like that, which we've all enjoyed this evening. And so a final thank you to the good people who put on tonight's event. Thank you both.
Great, thanks David. And just before we wrap this up, I just want to say, you know, that idea, that concept of governing with kindness, boy, could the world use a lot more of that. Eh? One more round of applause for the former premier, please. It's really been a pleasure co-chairing this evening with you, Indira. We appreciate it. We appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Our thanks to the Pearson Center as well. Thank you all. And with that, I would like to invite Kevin Bosch back to the stage to put some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, everybody. Wasn't that a wonderful night? Let me give a sincere thanks to Pat and Indira for being our co-chairs, and thank you for Steve and David. That was wonderful. That was inspiring is what that was. I would like to a massive thank you to all our partners who help us put this on and people who bought individual tickets. Your participation makes these Pearson Center events possible. If anybody out there was interested in becoming a partner, I invite you to do it. We want to do some interesting things that other people are not talking about. Under the leadership of our wonderful CEO, Pam DeMoff, we're doing a session on 7 years of the cannabis legislation with the Cannabis Council later this month. We're doing a series on Arctic sovereignty with Faskin. So if you'd like to be a partner with us, let us know. I might make you out of Lego too one day, who knows? Exactly. Big thanks to Pam Gutteridge and the team of volunteers that put on this event. It was incredible. Yeah. And thank you for everyone who came tonight. There is a draw. Folks, put your business cards in this basket here for a copy of Steve's book, Paikin and the Premiers. I think the winner has a fairly decent chance of getting Steve Paikin and maybe 2 premiers to sign it, to autograph it tonight. We'll see, okay? So I will not look and pull out. I got Verna Miedema. There you go, Verna. Okay, great, good. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, I'll give it to you. That's right. All right. Just let folks know if you want to be on our mailing list for future events, there's a yellow sign-up sheet on your table. Please put your name on it. Thank you everyone for coming, and please have a wonderful night. Merci beaucoup. À la prochaine. Thank you.